Good morning, or whatever time it is wherever you are when you watch this lecture. I'm going into a second lecture on obesity, and I want to talk about some aspects of it that you may not have considered. First of all, I want to give you an assignment. I want you to go online and to go to YouTube. Hopefully all of you are familiar with YouTube. Look up a video called Fat Rant, F-A-T-R-A-N-T. The author of it is Joy Nash, N-A-S-H. I want you to watch this video and look at her take on the issue of being fat. Then I want you to write a 1 to 2 page paper for me, single space, double 1-inch margins, blah, 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 blah. Don't forget spell check, don't forget grammar check. But what I want you to comment on, first of all, is your first initial reaction to the video. I want you to comment on how well you think she makes her point. I want you to comment on how valid you think her point is. If you were going to, and then finally, if you were going to respond to Miss Nash, what would you say to her in context of that fat rant? Okay, and write it up. There will be a Dropbox that I will place on the Nutrition and Obesity page, and it'll be open for a couple of weeks, starting this afternoon, I hope. And you can take a look at it and we'll see how it goes from there. Lots of news about obesity in the paper. Always, always, always. Now, understand something, and I've mentioned this in the other video lecture. I don't care as much what weight you are. What I care about is what your exercise is. You can be overweight. I'd rather you weren't obese or morbidly obese, but you can be overweight and be in physical shape, and that's far more important. But it still becomes an issue of what are you doing? Now, when we look at Oklahoma, we look at a state that has a great deal of obesity and is forecast to be 50% or more obese in the fairly near future. Not 50% or more overweight. We're already there, 50% or more overweight, but 50% obese. What are the implications of that for overall health? Well, we all know. I mean, increased risk of high blood pressure, increased risk of diabetes, and I would point out with diabetes that we have a large Native American population, and for whatever reason, Native Americans are more prone to diabetes than are Europeans, and cardiac disease. What is the biggest problem that you see? Now, what I see is twofold. Number one, there's an awful lot to eat, and it's good, tastes good, okay? I looked at a dessert, not a dessert, but a breakfast that a chef prepared in England that was your traditional breakfast, bacon, eggs, and cheese and bread, but they had taken it, put it in a sandwich, breaded it, and then fried it. And so this lovely little thing on a plate was 1,200 calories. Well, nobody needs 1,200 calories unless you're a logger, okay? Then you might need that many calories. Plus it was fairly high in grease, blah, 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 blah. But the question I want to turn it around to, the thing that we want to look at is, where do we start? I mean, we know the answer. We know the answer, eat less, exercise more. We know that people aren't doing this. What is it that causes people to not be able to respond to an obvious health risk? I mean, it's not like people haven't been told that it's a very good thing to lose weight and to maintain weight and to exercise. Why aren't we doing that? Part of it, I think, is the cheapness of food. Part of it is there's so many things to do that don't involve activity. I'm sitting here in front of a computer and waving my hands and ranting and raving, but waving my hands is not sufficient exercise. You go to class if you're in school, and you sit there for 50 minutes to an hour and a half while the teacher rambles on, and hopefully you take notes and it makes sense to you. We are not as active a people as our ancestors were. I want you to think back. How many of you can think of relatives? I'm not saying that they're alive now, but how many can think of relatives that lived 100 years ago? I know I have a fairly good understanding of several of my relatives that lived 100 years ago. One was a country doctor. Okay, his wife did all the cooking and cleaning in a house with 5 boys and 1 girl. You don't think she was busy? No vacuum cleaner, at least not initially. If you wanted shopping, there were no cars, at least not initially. Or if there was a car, Doc was going out 8 miles out of town to deal with somebody with a broken leg. So my other grandfather was a farmer. And he was up at 6 o'clock in the morning. He would do the chores. He would come in and have breakfast. He would go out and do all the other things that go with farming, especially without the mechanization that they have now. I mean, he obviously had mechanization, but not to the level they have now. So it was constant work at 55 to 60% VO2 max that kept him going. Yes, he ate a lot of calories, but he was constantly busy. Your ancestors were doing the same thing. If they were in Oklahoma in 1912, they were extremely busy. Farming at that time was difficult. Living in the city was difficult. There was an awful lot of things that we take for granted. If I wanted to make a salsa, I take out the magic bullet and I put the ingredients in, I twist, and oh look, salsa's all ground. If I wanted to make a salsa then, I had to go out to the garden and pick the appropriate vegetables, or go down the street to the market, or go to a neighbor who had the vegetables, and then I had to come home and mechanically chop them. I could cook, and I would be cooking for a lot of people, but I would be doing an awful lot of work standing up, constantly working, or I'd be out chasing the chickens. Chickens and I have a love-hate relationship. I think they're wonderful in a bechamel sauce. But I had to deal with chickens when I was growing up on the farm, so I'm not their biggest fan, except as dinner. So an awful lot of these kinds of things that went on that we don't do anymore, that we're much less active. And second thing is, I can eat more. I can eat more cheaply. You didn't have $1 hamburger. I think I mentioned in the last lecture that I looked up prices from 1919, and they were significantly higher, adjusting for inflation, significantly higher than the prices you pay now for food. You certainly didn't have anything like Golden Corral. You didn't have anything like the potatoes you had. The potatoes you had were the potatoes you grew. You didn't get these huge baked potatoes in from Idaho. So we've got a lot of problems related to inactivity, and we've got a lot of problems related to overeating. The question I want to leave you with is, what can we as health professionals do about that?